Listeners, first-time comers, welcome to Destination Aviation. I'm your host, Jeff Miller. For those of you that normally tune in, you know this part, your experience of this part, you know what I'm probably going to say. Nope, I'm just off my trip back from Dallas. I was down there at the AAAE General Aviation Conference. I got to meet up with friends, say hi to everyone. I had a really nice time. I got to see some people I used to work with, which is always great. Along with learning and the ever-ending quest for knowledge within aviation. I did come back with a cold. I don't know if that was from the guy that open mouth sneezed in the jet boarding bridge when I had no escape, or maybe it was somebody else. I don't know. But I nevertheless came back with a small cold, but that's all right. I'm happy to be here with you. Sorry to be a little more nasally than I normally am. I'm just a nasally person being from Michigan all the time, but extra today, extra nasally for you. But that conference we're actually be hosting in Chicago next year, and Chicago Executive Airport will be the host airport for the AAE General Aviation Conference as Chicago Executive Airport turns 100 years old, the first airport in the Chicagoland region to turn 100. So I am looking forward to that. We had an incident at the airport. I'll probably at least mention at the end of the show after we get through the interview, because we had an amazing guest. Normally I'm pretty, what do they call that? Jovial? Yes, a jovial individual. I'm pretty jovial most of the time. And we did have our moments of levity in our conversation. But Anthony Dyer is a retired United States Air Force Combat Special Missions Aviator, flying on what I believe now that I've learned through our interview, the AC-130, or the AC-130, and the A standing for attack, which I may have heard that before, but I sure as heck didn't remember it. You get to a point where sometimes in life you get this information and you're like, is that new? Did I know it before? I feel like I knew it before, but it slipped into the recesses of my brain. So I just thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Anthony, and he has an amazing story to share. And best of all, I'm sure you're going to enjoy the conversation as much as I did, so you'll probably run out and get his book, because Anthony wrote everything down and put it in a book called Moonchild. So after you get to know Anthony through the podcast, I'm sure you'll be like me, because I've not read the book up front, but I have ordered the book. It's en route to the homestead as we speak, and I'll be looking forward to reading it. We'll get into the conversation here with Anthony, and we'll finish up at the end with show notes and put in some of the details, how you can purchase Anthony's book. Well, Anthony Dyer, welcome to Destination Aviation.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff. I'm glad to be here.
No, absolutely. So you're the second author that I've had the pleasure of having on the show, both in the military. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Truly appreciate that. And thank you for coming on Destination Aviation and sharing a little bit of what your background is and what we're talking about here today, which is really the book you've written, which is Moonchild, correct?
Affirm, that's correct, yep.
And that's available right now on Amazon and other locations for people to purchase?
Yes, sir. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. If you just Google Moonchild, the roots and wings of a U.S. Air Force Combat Special Missions Aviator, Anthony Dyer is my name, and basically anywhere they sell books at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. So.
No, I love that. That's fantastic. And so Moonchild, I'll be the first, and I'm going to say this up front for all the listeners, is you're our second author, as I previously had stated. The first book, which I was able to read, this book, unfortunately, I haven't been able to read yet, but I have coming in the mail. But this is going to be such a treat for me because I get to kind of understand it from the author and your perspective before I read it. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I'll be upfront with saying I don't know too much about the background of it, but I love your cover. The cover's amazing. It's a beautiful cover. And just from glancing through it, Moonchild. Now, you were born on a full moon. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Is that where the name is coming from? Since I haven't read it.
Yeah, so it's really a combination of things. So my favorite poem is The Stay Wild Moonchild by Rita Clint. And, and flying on the, like you mentioned, I was born on a full moon, flying on the gunship, man. I've always been intrigued by the moon, when it's 100% illumination, man, it makes, aviating almost effortless, and, picking up terrain. It was almost like a lighthouse for us many nights, and, gunships we mostly fly at night, mostly But yeah, it's always been intrigued by it. And it's always, it's got a couple symbolic meanings. Really in the aviation part, when everything's going wrong and, all the systems are against you, the weather, the radios, on your worst day, that's when when the moon burns the brightest at night, those darkest nights, man. So that's sort of the theme, the overall theme of perseverance there. So
No, absolutely. And just for our listeners, so we have a mix of listeners that come to Destination Aviation. Some of them are within the industry. Others have no idea what our industry is and the multi-factors that go into it. So could you just kind of start from your beginning so people kind of understand your background, where you came from, who you are, and how you got into the military service?
Yeah, no problem. So I joined the Air Force July 18th of 2000, and the reason for joining the Air Force was, I get my senior year in college, still 17, and my dad gives me the typical, dad talks like, son, it's time to, get a job, go to college, or get out type.
We've all had those conversations.
Yeah. And so, and I was like, man, I didn't really have the drive to go to college. I didn't want to get educated, anything like that. And then, I talked to an Army recruiter, then a Navy recruiter, and he was talking about being on a boat for like 6 months. And I was like, I'm going to talk to my dad. My dad was in the Air Force as a comm guy down at MacDill for like 4 years. Wow. That was way before I was born. And, talked to me about mainly the quality of life of the Air Force and, and all the different jobs and stuff like that. And then, so I decided to do that in July 18, 2000, man. It was, I call it my first fixed wing flight ever was from Charlotte, as a passenger to San Antonio there. Wow. And then originally I joined the Air Force at the beginning as a weapons loader. They used to call us load-toes, and basically what that means is the guy who loads the bombs and missiles on your fighters and bombers and stuff like that. And I did that for approximately 5 years, and then I joined pre 9/11. Then 9/11 happened a year and some change after I joined, and I was like, man, I want to be a firefighter. I saw those guys running that building, the 343 that day, and decided to retrain my first time into Air Force fire protection. Basically it's the ARF, it's the guys who, the baked potato suits you guys see running around the airport there, stuff like that. yeah. And it was, I got to do that for approximately 5 years there at Charleston Air Force Base. Wow. And then, I get to a point, I'm actually home on leave, man, and it's 2010. Right at the beginning of 2010, and I'm at a pizza joint with some friends, and I realized, man, all this is really fun jobs, and I appreciate them, but I've really been sitting on the sideline with the global war on terror, and I look out, man, and I'm at this pizza shop, and I see the same cracks in the road, and what I'm sort of getting at is I've been doing the same old thing over and over since really no drive, no purpose, sense of purpose really, and I wanted to make a difference, and I was like, man, I don't want to leave cracks, I want to leave craters, and there was really no better way to do that than flying the AC-130, mighty AC-130 gunship, Spectre gunship, and the 16th Special Operations Squadron.
It's amazing. So it was the first airport I worked at when 9/11 happened, and from a civilian side to it, the perspective, and I think, at that time, I want to say the National Guard came in before TSA was really formed, but really, from your perspective as being in the military, I would just have to imagine. I mean, your whole mission changed overnight, right? I would think from where you were, where you go.
That definitely did. As a firefighter, really everything's so fire safe, especially on a DoD installation. And then maybe saw 3 structure fires a year, and not really any aircraft fire. But it's a good thing, if you're not working. But yeah, then I went to this AC-130 gunship, which is basically the whole mission is to provide that close air support for those unconventional forces, meaning like your SEALs, your Green Berets, your Rangers, etc. So, yeah, it was a really awesome job, man, and you really get to make a difference from a very direct, tip of the spear type standpoint. And I remember after my first time, we got went to a TIC, troops in contact, and I got to remember when it was done and over and all this, the smoke settles. It's like, man, I got to do more for my country in an hour and a half, 2 hour flight that I've done my whole life. So
yeah, no, and way more than most would have ever done. So again, thank you so much for what you did there. So in 2010, you said that's when you kind of made your switch. Did you leave the service at that point? Is that
no? I was I was still in. It was just the Air Force firefighter. Then I went to what was then Aerial Gunner, which. They've renamed it now, like 2012, 2013. What they did was they made like I said, a Swiss Army knife in the sky, if you will. And then basically you combine your aero gunner with your load master and your flight engineer. So you got one guy performing all 3 of those tasks now.
Wow. When did you actually leave the service? And you're not still in it, correct?
Yeah, I'm retired now. I retired 1 December of 21, and pretty much started a civilian contractor job on base, doing the flight simulator type stuff out here and running the IOS, setting up scenarios, and basically taking some of those lessons learned and scenarios and building them into a scenario for the our future air commandos or our air commandos out here at Cannon Air Force Base. So.
No, I love that. And then you became an author.
I did, yeah. It was, as far as how the sort of the book came to be, I never really intended on writing it. And there was a point in my career where I went to the rescue helicopter, the HA-60G Payhawk, and talking about switching missions, definitely going from an offensive platform to a rescue asset, and long story short, I was involved in a pretty nasty cast event June 8th of 2018 in East Africa. I would say that, and I got to see the best side of combat search and rescue. I mean, we saved 5 lives, and the worst side, that one Eagle, one American. He unfortunately passed on the operating table later.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But yeah, and basically I ended up I went back to gunships, and I went to my last trip to Iraq there. Then at this point I'd been in over 20 years, and I was like, man, like I saw the the ending coming soon, and the whole identity, sense of purpose, that's a real thing when you get towards the end of that hallway, and like I ended up getting help, and I started drinking, to be honest with you, man, like what was a pint a day or more just to get sleep and stuff like that. And so I did the prolonged exposure there with a USOCOM psychiatrist, and basically the idea behind that is like you get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like you're talking about the story, and you write it out and write it out and write it out. And I remember the first time I told the psychiatrist the story, like I cried, and at the point she cried, and she was always like, you should tell your story, and I said no 100 times, man. But when I got out and that dust settled, I was like, you know what, like maybe I can pay it forward. Maybe someone can read this book and have similar struggles and get help. And if so, that's a blessing, so. No,
I love that. I love, part of the whole idea for me with the podcast is just kind of real conversations, especially in our industry, because, whether you're on the military side or the civilian side, people want to kind of protect, I'm Superman. I go through everything. But the reality is we all go through things, and having someone just be upfront about their experience, to your point, can help people so much through that process. So if you were picking up this book, and again, I'm looking forward to reading it. Mine's coming in the mail right now, and I really am looking forward to reading it. Is this for someone who wants to be on a journey in the book? Is it, to your point, something in your mind? Did you write it for that person that maybe is struggling? Did you write it for a multitude of people? Maybe that person, maybe someone who's interested in military aviation or background, or what could a reader kind of expect, or what was your anticipated reader looking like? Or is it across the board? Is it universally applied to people that they could read this book and pull from it what they choose, whatever their point of view is?
Yes, I basically for two different audiences. One, sometimes in that life, man, especially in the rescue side of things, right? And you can see the worst thing that can happen to somebody, and that definitely sticks with you, And basically, we just got done with 2 decades of war to realize the fact that it's okay to not be okay, and to reach out and get help, man. It's like, and the second part is like, these stories, if you've got an awesome platform and a podcast, and I chose to write it on paper to get these stories out, and I think every veteran has a story, and also just to show America, man, like, this is what goes on when you're sleeping at night, like these things are real, they happen, and just have each other's back, and if you need help, just don't be afraid to speak up,
No, I love that. I love that so much. So, through the writing process, I think, and again, you were so gracious to share kind of the digital platform. Did you dedicated the book to your daughter? Is that correct? Or if I'm off on that time?
Yeah. My wife and my daughter, but I get to a point with my drinking where the initial foot in the door getting help, the reason was like, my wife was like, hey, like, it's either, me and your daughter or the alcohol. And of course I chose my family, and I'm thank God I did, I think I'm a better man for getting help, so I would, all to my family, that's my rock, so.
No, I love that. And when you were shopping titles for the book, how did you settle on it? I know we talked a little bit earlier, but what was that process?
Yeah. So my publisher, he's the guy that actually did the cover
The cover's amazing. It's a beautiful cover. Yeah,
thank you.
I love that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that was all. Shout out Robbie Grayson there at Trademarker Media.
Love it.
And I went through this, the whole book, and I haven't even titled it yet. And then I was like, something was just telling me to put the poem "Stay Wild, Moonchild" there from Rita Clinton in the very beginning, and like he's like, man, like I think there's a lot of the moon symbology here and like meaning behind all this, and I think you should title it Moonchild, and we both agreed on that. So
no, that's phenomenal. Do you feel like this is your end of literary work, or are you going to continue forward with a series of books? Do you have other ideas, or is this, hey, I got my story out and I'm happy with the story, or did this light a fuse for you of further books?
It definitely lit a fuse. I'm working on something now, sort of in the grassroots part of that, but I definitely want to keep writing, man, and writing's fun, and like every time what would happen, I wanted to pick up a bottle and start drinking, man. I would pick up a pen and start getting these emotional Charlotte's Web of words and throwing them on paper to try to make sense of all this, man, and this this 2 decades of war and the stuff you see and stuff like that. And I feel better after I write, man. I don't know, it's therapeutic.
No, I love that. It is something about kind of the creative side, right? That you can get some of that out. So much of my day job, I find it difficult sometimes to get creative with it because it is very black and white and in our industry as far as here's the rules, here's the regulations. But we had a small incident at our airport here the other day. But at the end of it, even after all the cleanup and everything, it's nice to take a breath. Okay, nobody was hurt. And then I knew I had this interview with you the next day. I was like, I'm looking forward to just talking with someone, getting, like I said, the first book that came on here was Lessons from the Admiral, and it very much, Mark Fava wrote it, and it was kind of taking lessons and applying it to your life that he learned from being a loop to the Admiral. And so I went through and I read the whole thing, and I was like, get out my notes. And so, I was like, yesterday we got so busy here. I was like, oh, I really want to get into it. But then, there's a part of me that's so excited for the journey to, one, meet you, because you seem like an amazing person, and then be able to read the book really with you in my head. And I'm hoping people that are listening to this too go and pick up the book, because knowing who you are, you can kind of understand it then better, probably from your perspective and just you as a person. And so I love that I selfishly have that opportunity to do that with your book. So thank you for that.
Thanks for buying and considering it, man, and having me on. And it's as far as the thing was aviation, things happen, and I think I thought about this when we were talking about, but like there's situations where everything isn't especially in like military type aviation and special operations. It's not always black and white, and it's like there is a gray area sometimes where there's really no right or wrong. I get into that in the book, and basically there is a gray area, but to me it was all either safe or unsafe, and so there is like every situation flying, like I always try to take that tactical second to be like, okay, what's the bigger picture, what's going on? Because one thing I've learned, man, with me, like tunnel vision was a problem every now and then, so
yeah,
try to see the big picture.
And I would assume, and I'll say this more from my side to it, because I was never in the military myself, so just having friends and trying to understand it. Your particular role is C-130, right? As a kind of, is it, that's the aircraft, right?
Yeah. The first one I started flying on, the majority of my flight hours there was on the AC-130 gunship.
Okay.
The AC identifier would be a TAC and cargo, but
Okay.
And basically, what the Air Force did, was, back in like Vietnam, we basically put a 40 mil Bofors cannon and then a 105 howitzer. So if you were to take an anti-aircraft gun the Navy built, the Bofors, and then put a tank cannon on the side of a C-130, you have this, flying castle of doom, and many nicknames come with it. Puff the Magic Dragon, all this stuff. Yeah.
Do you have any opportunity to name any of the aircraft? Because those are pretty good names.
What's cool about flying on the H-model gunship, man, was like there was tail numbers like 6.9 and 7.2. So the same overall skeleton structure of the aircraft was the same ones that flew in Vietnam and the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Yeah, so there was names like Grave Digger, Wicked Wanda. Wicked Wanda was one of my favorites. Things like that. Death Angel and all that stuff. So,
and your role, on it was operating one of the, what did you refer to them as, cannons? Is that?
Yeah. So the one I started out on was the H model gunship, and it's came a long way to gunship, but the 40 mil Bofors cannon,
Yeah.
which was an anti-aircraft piece that the Navy had made, and then we hung it on the side of an aircraft, and it comes in these 4-round clips, and basically where an aero gunner makes his money on a gunship would be that malfunction analysis, recognize what you have, and get the gun back online. And I know that sounds simple enough, but you could imagine a Green Beret getting lit up on the ground. You can't figure out what's wrong with your gun. You don't want to be that guy. So we took a lot of pride in being the weapons experts of the crew. And back then we had a traditional flight engineer up front, and then 4 gunners, then a load master in the back scanning, where he could see the whole 3-9 line back with a bubble.
Wow. And so on a particular mission, your role in the aircraft would have been operating it, or, like, to your point, operating plus looking for malfunctions, that type of.
Yeah. So you're basically you're what called pre-striking the gun. You're getting the gun ready. You're getting it cocked, ready to fire, right?
Wow.
And you're loading it, primarily on the gun. So there was situations where you'd turn into like a flying artillery guy, where you'd tie a lanyard to the 105, and you would be as we think about traditionally pulling the trigger, and back then we had enlisted sensor operators that would, actually hit the button to pull the trigger, like, as we call it.
Okay.
But when I went to helicopter 60s, you're actually guy, manning shooting the 50 cal and the 7.62 minigun. So.
Wow. So you're pretty low level missions then, I would assume, right? I know we can't get into details on it, but that I would assume with cannons and stuff like that, you're pretty low to the ground, right?
Yeah. Relatively speaking, to most aircraft, especially like airliners, stuff like that. Yeah, we are a lot lower. Yeah.
Wow. And when you had your missions, I know you were in a long time in the military. Were you stationed within Afghanistan, Iraq, or were you mostly within the United States, and then you would fly out for missions, or?
Yeah. So we would do all of our training and our pre-deployment training here in the States.
Okay.
And I was at Cannon Air Force Base, and then I went to Bagram in double digits at least for deployments there. And back then, it still is, like, it's all based on your flight hours. That's still a rule. Like, we would get to downrange, you'd be 3 months into deployment, flying night after night, and then I think it was like 90 days was 125. Don't quote me on that, but that was the rule for, like, once you go over that, took a waiver, and there's waivers for everything, but. So after you're usually 3 months, it'd be time to come back, and 3 months home, then 3 months over there.
Wow. And then you said, so from flying, you then went into really firefighting capability at a military base, right?
Well, yeah, I went from a firefighting to flying. So
okay. I'm sorry. So it was reverse. Okay.
Yeah. So I went from firefighter to aero gunner.
Okay. And what I'm sorry that I kind of understood that part. What made you switch then from firefighting to the aircraft? What was that again?
So, yeah, I was at that, the pizza joint back home and sitting there with some friends, and I see the same cracks in the road, and I realized, man, I'd really done, nothing for the war on terror, and I wanted to get in a fight,
Okay.
And then also I went back to the fire station, and I see this book, and it's called Chosen Soldier by Dick Couch, and this was before the movie Fury made the Isaiah 6:8, the Send Me version in the Bible, really popular. But, I read that, and it was, and I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, whom will go before us? And I said, here, my Lord, send me, is that Bible verse, and that just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to get into special operations. And I think, it's good to differentiate. Like, I was an aviator in special operations, where, like, I knew realistically, like, physically, I couldn't be an operator, because, like, the water is the game changer in itself, you know what I mean? It's the equalizer. So I decided to do the next best thing, was make sure those guys get home to their families. So
Wow, that's amazing. And I, just so I get the timeline right, so then that was 2010. And you flew then in A130, right? I know I said A130.
AC-130, yes,
AC-130,
right.
AC-130. You flew on that for how long?
So it's about the H model, about 5 years there, for 2010 to 2015ish,
Okay.
And then I went to the rescue helicopter, Payhawk helicopter there in the 41st Rescue Squadron for about 4 years there at Moody Air Force Base. And then I came back and I did the AC-130 Whiskey Block 20, which now, man, we have bombs on them. It's more really of a bomb truck with we have the 30 mil gun now and the 105 with different other bombs and stuff on the pylons. But
wow. Did I hear you correct? You said you were on a rescue mission too? Is that?
Yeah. So it was June 8th, 2018. I was on a rescue helicopter, the Payhawk, and that was in East Africa.
Okay.
And long story short, there was about 40 special operations forces, and then a lot of partner nation. and it was day 7 of an op that was going really good. And, they gaffed in, meaning they drove their Humvees and stuff like that in. And then on day 7, all hell breaks loose, and, they start getting mortar and disco fire, and we get alerted to go, get these guys out of that situation. And, basically to paint a picture to how wrong this flight was going from the beginning, we take off, man, and I see just round impacts. And what it was, we were in like a right-hand turn, and the left gunner, he had a runaway gun because of it was like a worn steer notch or something like that made the 50 cal just continually shoot when we armed it. I pulled the flare pins out, which the flares is what protects us against the, surface to air missiles, right?
Yeah.
And then I jettisoned all of our flares because, like, I pulled the pins out and there was water in that panel, which shorted it out. So it had that voltage, that pulse to it. And jettisoned all that, man, I could feel the heat from all the, the flare fireballs, and surprised I have eyebrows left at that point. Yeah. And then we're getting what I'm gathering over the communication. The comms is like a 5-line, which is close air support from a JTAC. And it's really rare to do that on a rescue helicopter with 50 cals,
Yeah.
And so we get there and we do about, 4 gun patterns, man. And all 4 guns on target. There was basically 12 bad guys in the tree line. And, I think we killed about 8 of them. And we come in and, land. We were the first one to land, pick up our 3 cat alphas, meaning they, within that golden hour they needed to get back to operating table to live, right?
Yeah.
And, so one guy, they put him back there, then they put another Green Beret beside me, then a partner nation guy who got shot in the stomach.
Oh, God.
And then, we take off and then egress the area, and get back. And then we went back and they had one more guy to pick up. So we covered them with, suppression fire in that tree line while they picked up the last cat alpha. And we got back and, I'll never forget that, the experienced gunner, somebody's like, hey, check the aircraft for bullet holes, helicopter, stuff like that. And I'm looking for bullet holes, and I come around the front, and the aircraft commander, I could see in his face what had happened. And I asked him what happened, and he's like, unfortunately, when American got back, that they had passed away on the operating table. And, that does stick with you, and, what I've learned about, especially in the flying, man, is it's not what you do that haunts you, it's what you don't do, right? And, but yeah, and I end up getting help, man, and I realize I'm at peace now with the fact that we did everything we could to save all those guys. And, unfortunately, the guy would have passed anyway, come to find out. But
no, I mean, I can't even imagine to articulate the emotional toll that would take. That's a lot to go through. Is that, do you, through your flying experience, along with kind of that emotional, I mean, like I said, I can't even really describe how probably what you had to go through there. But it probably speaks volumes to the book and where you are now from experiences like that. Do you have, a mission that you're like, yeah, that mission was a good mission. I loved whatever that may be. When through kind of your flying experience, is there something that you're like in your head, at least, and maybe it's in the book, I don't know, but you're like, yeah, you know what, that one, whether I don't know. I guess we'll just ask, is there something that sticks in your mind? Like that was something that you enjoyed. I know there's a lot, of emotional toll that happens, but is there something in your mind that you're like, yeah, that was really fun. That was patriotic. That was cool. That was.
Yeah. The time where I really realized like I wanted to do this for the rest of my life was this was my first gunship mission, and we had landed from another operation we were supporting. We were overhead, and basically we had just shot the tweak rounds, which is basically think about lining your sights to your weapon.
Okay,
that's what all those rounds were for. And so we didn't do anything. We came back, and it was rare because like it was what we call pinky time, when the sun's coming up. And the gunship, we didn't fly in the day, it took a big wave or stuff like that. But it happened, and basically the pilot comes back to the gun deck and he's like, there's a Green Beret team, they're taking fire, they're pinned down. He's like, they need us. He's like, who's with me? And, end of the duty day, every one of us said, send me your own version of send me, right? And like, I remember flying over, man, and like what it was there was the 3 Taliban guys had, explosive packs on, and I just see RPG, flash, and
wow.
They were shooting at the Green Beret team. And then at that point, I went and got back on the 40 mil. And I think it was about 60 rounds, and we took out 3 dudes. And,
wow.
There were secondaries from their explosions. And that's when I was like, just the intensity and the JTAC's voice. And when they call you in overhead, it's a feeling you never got really used to, because when they call you overhead, they can hear your props, and they knew who we were. And, they start running like bees, man. And at that point, they know it's over.
Wow,
So
that's and it's interesting because like I said, for me being and now really looking forward to reading your book, I just realized in my head I didn't know that these missions were only at night, so that is also the title, probably, right? Moonchild.
yeah,
One, you're
yeah,
being born on a moon, but all your missions predominantly happened at night. You're saying, right?
yes, sir. Yeah, and it was the moon was always like a good get well point, good guide,
Wow.
like a lighthouse for me, and like it would help you, pick up terrain. It would help you pick up even with your NVGs, enemy tracer fire, and it really always, I don't know, feel like a protector, So
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure everybody on the ground, like I said, loved.
yeah,
Yeah, when you were coming through, when the previous book that I had on here, and he worked we worked for the Loop, but before that he was a crew member on a P3, and
okay, yeah,
I had talked to a P3 pilot, and they had said, I think, four fans of freedom, I think is what they called it. Something
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm assuming probably similar in your case, right? That you hear it and you're like, oh, good guys are here.
Yeah, yeah, it's often the gunship's referred to as God's right hand. I think there's a yeah,
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, and it's I forgot. So Marcus Luttrell was on I think he's on like the Sean Ryan show, and
Yeah.
he's talking about Spectre, like the gunship, and how
Yeah.
basically we can erase you with a finger, right? And what he's talking about is really God's right hand, and some people call it God's chariot, man. And Four Fans of Freedom is always a classic. So yeah.
No, I can imagine. Do you miss flying it at all? Do you
Oh
miss-
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean that was the best moments of my life, and just with your brothers and sisters in the air, and making
Yeah.
sure your brothers on the ground get home, and that's what it was all about. And there was a letter. I read it in the 16th, but every day, there's this guy. He's a ranger, and he's holding his baby girl, and he writes the 16th SOS. Hey, I want to thank you guys for your close air support. Because of you guys, like the gunship, I get to go home and see my baby girl, and like that was it. That was my why, 100%.
Oh yeah, no, I can imagine getting something like that. It's amazing. I mean, literally life and death scenarios. It's
Oh yeah.
not only the gravity and the weight of what you have to carry, but those moments of kind of jubilee of people that can come back to you and say, "Hey, this allowed me to go back to my family." That's again just such an emotional roller coaster. I can't even fathom to understand that you had to go through there. When you got back to the States, I guess from your missions and stuff, do you find now that I know you said you're training, right? And you're putting people through courses. Is that kind of your role
Yeah,
now?
yeah. So it's you're familiar with like the CAE, like the flight simulators and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Mhm.
It's like that, but there's different. Like for the gunship, for example, there's the front part, then there's the back part,
Yeah.
and we tie these things together, and you could do a full tactical mission, like a night profile, and you put different threats, different bad guys for them to shoot, stuff like that, and and it's never an easy scenario. You throw that, and you throw some emergency procedures, like, hey, you lost your number one engine.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? They need close air, things like that. And, you paint that picture for them so that way when they get down range, like, I've been here before. Because there's even a point in the book where, like, I mentioned, like, during that rescue mission, man, on Payfox, like, all hell's breaking loose, but I take a second and I'm like, okay, I've been here 100 times in training. I know what this is.
Yeah.
This isn't my first 5-1. I know what we're doing.
Wow. When I worked at the Pittsburgh International Airport for a while, and they had two bases on the airfield. One was the 9/11th, and at the time, they don't have them anymore, but they had the C-130s. And I remember it was like my first week. And you talk about fire departments, so at airports, right? Aircraft rescue,
Yeah.
firefighting, the guys in the potato suits. They called an alert. We have an engine out. And it was coming in, right? And like, I'm like, oh, I know I have 4 engines, but I'm like, oh crap, an engine's out, right?
Yeah.
And nobody around me was like, they ran to the ARF trucks ran to the to the runways and were talking about it, but nobody really seemed like too stressed about it. And then after it landed, I was like, oh, and they're like, oh, they shut it down on purpose. They're like, they do that for training. They'll shut down an outside engine and then they'll come in for training. And it sound maybe similar to at least what you're simulating is, at least they were doing it, there. It seemed like in real time they would do it after I got, oh, okay, they're coming in with an engine out. They would shut one of them down and come in without it. And I don't know if they still do training like that or not, but
yeah, it was, from what I remember, from my firefighting days, it was always what throttles, bottles, battery,
Yeah.
you shut the big 3 down, and then, you start getting people out, if they're not out already, and they egress. And then, with the aircraft fire, it's so volatile, man. It's a lot of times it's going to be surround and drown type scenarios, especially when you get with munitions. And
I was just going to say, you're dealing with something that, us at commercial airports. I mean, sometimes there's hazardous cargo on cargo planes, but you actually have weapons. You have a giant bomb. I mean, that even as a firefighter, I'm assuming you running into that, like that has to be an insane amount of pressure beyond just a normal fire to know that there's live ammunition in this plane.
Yeah, there was always like the PPE part of that, man. Your protective equipment. That's such a big part of that job, man. Like wearing your mask all the times, and it couldn't even be a fire sometimes. Like let's say there was like a F-16 come in, and there was just nasty stuff called like hydrazine, I believe it's called, and like you don't want to inhale that at all, So definitely you take a second, make sure all your clothing's good, right? Your PPE and stuff like that. So
when you were doing the fire rescue missions, is there anything that sticks out for you in that maybe an incident or something you had to respond to that maybe it's in the book? And again, looking forward to reading it.
Yeah. So I touched briefly on my, my fire service in there, but it was a lot. Like I said, it was maybe 3 good structure fires, I would call them. And one of those was in Balad, Iraq. And what it was there was some open wiring, and it was the market, the bazaar type situation. A guy put some of those big furry meat blankets on some open wire, and man, all these different trailers, all this open space, and all the open oxygen, he kept feeding it. It took 12 hours to put that thing out, man. I tell people that there was probably 2 days I worked my whole career, and one was like, on big shoot, right, and then one was that fire, man. We had to get IVs at the end of it.
Did you ever? Do you fly yourself? Did you catch the bug to want to fly? Or?
So not as a pilot. No, I'm so I just air gunner pride, and that's what I've always been, what I always will be. So.
I love that. So no, you're nowhere down the road. We'll see Anthony flying. You're not going to fly.
Possibly, yeah. I don't know. Maybe like a PC-12 type Cessna one of these days. I'll try to get my license, but I love that. I'm content with like being a gunner and. What we did, so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's amazing. Do you, if you were, so we have young listeners that tune in. If, a couple times, we just had an engineer on our last episode, and we talked a little bit about, that career track, knowing kind of where we are, and you probably have a better opinion on this than most. What would be your advice to someone, as far as services? Would you say, yeah, here's the route you should take, or would you be cautionary in any of that? Or I guess what advice would you give to someone if they're thinking maybe a route in the military or a route, versus going commercially? Do you have any kind of tidbits, advice that you'd want to give a youngster that may be tuning into the program?
Yeah, 100%. The biggest lesson that's helped me throughout my aviation career was, I'm going to paint a picture for you, man. So my very first flight on an AC-130 gunship ever, it went so bad, man, to where like the instructor said something to the effect of like, "You're the reason they have to brief seatbelts on airliners," Like it was going that bad, right? Like, he saw me sort of licking my wounds at the end of the flight, and he said something to me that I've always remembered. He's like, "Hey, what's the most important word in the dictionary?" And I was like, "I don't know, man." He's like, perseverance, that P word. And he goes, "I want you to think about what that word means to you, and I want you to come into the next flight, and tell me what that means and reflect on that and perform, Wow. And what he was getting at is like, you fall down 7 times, you get up 8, right? Like you're going to make mistakes. You're learning, and when that happens, it's good to, for one, have tough skin, to 2, to realize that they're training you for your worst day of your life. And as far as aviating on the worst flight of your life, everything's against you, your systems, your weather, your emergency procedures, runaway guns, flares, whatever the case may be. That's the day where everybody you hold close and dear needs you to be the best aviator you could be. So I've learned that through that lesson,
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. So I'm assuming Air Force would be the branch you would recommend someone to go to.
Yeah. I'm obviously biased, but I'd say the Air Force, quality of life, TDY with golf clubs, not really good. Yeah.
I love that.
And, and the Army has their 160th guys, which the best. They're awesome what they do, So.
Yeah. Is that do you find then now with being a contractor towards it, do you like that? Because you're not in the service anymore, but you're basically consulting on all your expertise. Do you Do you like sitting in that kind of wheelhouse now after military life?
Yeah, because that that sense of purpose, like I'm still in the game a little bit. I know
Sure.
it's all, I hate to say it, make believe now, but it's really not, because these scenarios happen. And you're basically you're helping improve someone else's their tactics, techniques, procedures, and you see the fruit of that when they get back from downrange, and the best case scenario is something they could tell you is like, man, that really helped me. That scenario. So.
Yeah, no, I again get somebody that it's interesting on the civilian side of the world. I think a little bit about like air traffic control, and my brother was an air traffic controller. He retired, and there's opportunities to take your knowledge and apply it back to people that are going through the system now. And so I do think it's an amazing opportunity for someone coming up that they can learn from you, especially, giving your experience, that it probably makes them more well-rounded, military service member. So thank you for that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So what's the next book title, or is that a secret?
I'm still working on that, man. I'm like I said, it's very just kicking around some ideas, but what I really want to do, like project wise, is I've only told a few people this, but like I want to create like a hub, basically a way for every veteran has a story, for them to tell that story and get it published and edited, because like I said, without books, man, like these stories die, and I don't want. I realized at a young age, especially in a book there, I talk about it, like, when you die, man, that you can't take anything with you, man. Like there's like the saying, there's no hearse behind or U-Haul behind a hearse, right? And like,
I haven't heard that, actually. That's pretty good.
And it's basically, Marcus Aurelius said, what we do in life echoes in eternity, meaning that, really all you can do is leave behind your legacy, how you're remembered. And without books and authors, these things don't happen, and podcasts, so.
Yeah, no. How did you find the writing process? Was it easy for you? Was it easy to get it down, or did you take time?
Yeah, so it wasn't too bad. Like I had a lot of especially like when I got treatment, the prolonged exposure, a lot of that, the flying part of it written, I wrote it down, at least in my mind a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so I got it on paper. And what happened was I got on LinkedIn and I reached out to there's a war journalist, and I think I looked up something to the effect of like military, biography editors, and like Holly McKay's name came up, and I messaged her on LinkedIn, like a proposal, like, hey, I want to do this, and we scheduled a phone call, and then, and she's like, yeah, we'll do it. And back and forth with the Word document, questions, answers, stuff like that for, a few months. And then, yeah, man, she did really awesome, man. Like basically helping me figure out like what I was really trying to say, get to it. Right.
Yeah.
And then she recommended the publisher, Robbie Grayson, there at Trademark Media. And I never looked back, man. It was an awesome experience. And I highly recommend, if you've got, words in your heart, man, bleed it out on that page. So
I love that. And I'm sure the listeners will love it as well. It's interesting because in a world, like I said, digital, I'm a hard book reader, and the cover just had me sold from the beginning. I was like, okay, it has to be on my shelf even when I'm done reading it, because it's almost like a work of art. I do love the way your book looks. It looks so coul.
That was all Robert Grayson, a talented guy, man. So talented.
Yeah, it really is. It captures. I know when I was first looking at it, I'm like, oh yeah, this looks like something I want to read. So I'm so much forward looking to this read. And I would say too, the thing that I think is exciting is you've been so open and honest about your process and where you were, where you've come through, and where you're at now, that I feel like anybody listening this that picks up the book as well can have somewhat of that personal connection to you as the author and read it really through Anthony's eyes, which to me, I think is going to be a good part of the journey here of reading this book, because it will be the first time in my life I actually spoke to the author before I read the book. And I think that's really cool. So anybody listening, they could pick that up too.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Yeah. Man, I hope you really enjoy the read. It's a short read. It's somebody put it to me, they're like, man, it's like a great 2-hour Sunday read, So,
I love that. When I travel a lot for business, and I love to have, good book on the plane. And this is going to be a great book to read on the plane, because it's kind of my downtime. I don't know how other people look at it, but whether it's, reading, when you're going to bed, or you're reading it, on a plane or something like that. And I love it. And the other thing that I find too is especially when you're reading an aviation book on a plane, people automatically want to start asking you what the book's about because you're in that headspace
Yeah,
anyways, right?
that's very true. Yeah, man, I've never. You're so right about that. They definitely look what you're reading. You know, that's
Right,
what it's
yeah,
about.
right. Well, so it's funny because the last book on here, I was actually reading it before the interview, and I was sitting next to a recruitment that was going into the Navy, and I didn't know, but he saw the cover and he started asking me about it. He was on the plane going to, I think it's the Great Lakes Naval Station, just
Yeah.
near where I am here in Illinois. And so I love kind of those little nuggets. Is there anything about the book or your past that maybe I haven't asked that you wanted to send out to the listeners? Anything that's hitting your head there?
No, it's there is some stuff of growing up in Appalachia, there, and some of the the things that was like I was taught growing up, like you ever heard of like water dowsing, like with the metal wires and you find water.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I talk about how my grandfather showed me that, and
Wow.
First time I showed my wife, like she freaked out.
So
there's a lot of Appalachian folklore and stuff like that. Yeah,
I was just gonna ask, so that's home for you? Is it that Tennessee or?
It's Western North Carolina. If you know where Asheville's at, I grew up in a small town called Silva, about an hour west of Asheville.
Oh, wow.
Right there. So
has your home changed? I know Asheville. I know the airport director down there. It seems like Asheville's blown up in population. Does your hometown still resemble what you remember, or has it grown quite a bit?
It's grown quite a bit, man. That pizza's actually a spot I talk about in the book. Moved to a different location because they created like a bike lane or something where the mountain bikers can come through. Yeah, there's all kinds of breweries now. A lot of stuff, man. That people want to if you ever want to visit a cool little Appalachian town, Silva, North Carolina, there's a City Lights bookstore. I did my first book signing there, and it was cool to go back to my hometown bookstore.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah,
really cool place.
Does so I remember now. This is like watching Petticoat Junction or Green Acres or one of those shows, but I remember them using the sticks. And so does it, you actually find water? I don't want to blow any secrets in the book, so maybe you don't want to tell me, but does that work?
Yeah, 100%. Like I even heard I think his name's Randall Carlson on Sean Ryan talking about it, and he's talking about how it sort of freaked him out because when the guy showed him, they cross aggressively, and there's ley lines and stuff like that, and then but sure enough, man, I can get like 2 copper hangers, put them at a 90-degree angle, and I showed my wife to see if I still got it, man, and she made me put them up, man, because it freaked her out. Because sure enough, you walk over the water, it just crosses, magnetized type stuff.
Wow,
yeah, there's a lot of I grew up thinking that's just how we find water, man, and but it was on the episode talking about. I was like, man, there was like a society back home that gets paid for that. So,
well, yeah, I mean, if it works, seems like a simplistic way to do it. So they cross, and then that's where you would dig your well. That was
yeah. So you'll be walking, and they'll start doing this, and all of a sudden, when you get over the water, they'll just aggressively like make an X, and then straight down is that's it. A large amount of water.
Wow. Okay. Well, hey, I learned something new there too.
Yeah.
If only I didn't have that darn city water at the house. Maybe when I buy my cabin.
It works, and I remember my grandfather. I think he said you could use like a willow branch or something, face
really?
like a wishbone almost, and it'll point down, But yeah, all kinds of cool stuff in Appalachia, man. So.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's amazing. Wow. And so, do you get back home much? You don't live there now, right?
I do. Honestly, I wish I got back home more, but I went home in July for the July 5th was the book signing there.
Wow.
It's so good. It was like a reunion, man, and borderline revival, man. It was cool to see everybody. So,
how long has the book been out now?
Since April 7th, of this year.
Okay. So. Wow. Well, congratulations again. Like I said, I'm looking forward to good things. I will just put that out there because I at least from what I saw in your personality, I think a couple of things. One, me loving aviation, I love that part to it. But the second part where we all go through struggles, and you're just being open and honest about it helps a lot of people. And I think in our industry, right, kind of the stigma behind getting help. There's all these articles, right, especially if you're a pilot and you're flying for an airline or something like that. We're all just human beings trying to navigate this world.
100%. That's a really good point. And I'll lead it with this, but basically we're all very, especially in aviation, we're all very ordinary people in the military, very ordinary men and women doing very unordinary, extraordinary things, right? So it is okay to every now and then be like, man, I need to take that tactical knee and I need to get help, because like you said, it's very uncommon getting in the sky, right? So.
No, absolutely. Well, any last words? I mean, I love I asked that before and you came up with a dynamite example of water fighting. So I'm going to ask again. Anything left that you want to say, or we?
Yeah, I just want to quote my favorite pilot I ever flew with. When he left the 16th, he sent an email out to the whole squadron, and here's the quote, and it's love a good woman, drive a fast car, fly with all your heart, and everything else will fall into place, man. So,
I love that. I've never heard that one either. No, that's fantastic.
Yeah. He came up with it and always stuck with me, So.
Well, Anthony, thank you so much for being on Destination Aviation. So to pick up a copy of Moonchild, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, do you have any books? Do you have a website if people want to find you for a book signing event somewhere or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a Moonchild on Facebook. It's just a picture of me and like my NVG's looking out a window at night, and then also a Trademarker Media, Robbie Grayson, his site has the the quick easy links at the bottom of it, stuff like that.
And I will definitely add in any of those links into the show notes for anybody listening that they can go, and if they're just on their Apple Podcasts and you go to the show notes, I'll put those links in so they can pick up your book.
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to reading it. Anthony, thanks again so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jeff. This was a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Well, that was a great conversation with Anthony Dyer, and I really appreciate him coming on the podcast and sharing his stories. Probably a little more serious content than what we're normally used to on the podcast, but I loved it because at the end of the day, I look at the podcast as kind of an eclectic source of what I would like to do in life, and that is talk to these amazing people. And so if you have your own amazing stories, please remember to share them with us. I would love to, at least bring them up on the podcast, or be a future guest with us here, just like Anthony was. And again, an amazing story. His book is available on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, as he mentioned, and I'm going to put all that information in the show notes so everybody can go and pick up his book. And if you did want to be a future guest, just email us at dapodcast85@gmail.com. Would love for one, suggestions for guests, but also two, if you guys have stories you'd like to share, send some information over. I love getting comments in on the website. That's always fantastic. I did mention at the beginning of the show, so at the airport I worked at, we did have an aircraft have an excursion from the runway, an excursion leaving the surface of the runway unattended, as it sounds from the word, right? So in this case, overshooting the end of the runway. At the end of our runways, we have a material which is referred to as engineered material arresting system. It's basically like those, if you've seen those slopes if you're driving to like Colorado or the Smoky Mountains, where they have the runoff for trucks that lose their brakes and they can run up a hill. It's basically like a giant area of sand. Kind of the same idea, a tiered, stepped approach. And an engineered material arresting system is basically kind of like a crushable concrete. But it did its job and it slowed the aircraft down. And thankfully, nobody was hurt. And that, at the end of the day, you can replace anything, but you can't replace people. And so I'm really glad that everyone's safe. Partially why I wanted to talk about it is I was speaking with the FAA about the incident. And, as a pilot, I never once, through ground school or any point in my flying career, has anyone ever told me as a pilot about engineered material arresting systems and really what it means. And what you should do if you're a pilot and you find that you're going to go into it and how you should go into it. And really the guidance there is you go directly into the EMAS bed because it's designed to break away under the weight of the aircraft and slow you down and stop you, ideally. And so there's different parameters in there, and maybe we'll do a further detailed analysis on what EMAS is down the road. But I did want to mention it because I've been getting a lot of messages about it, people just asking if everything's okay, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the messages coming into the podcast. So thank you so much for reaching out to me. We have an amazing team at the airport I worked at. They worked tirelessly to get everything back up in running order. It's the best team I've ever worked with. They're just phenomenal at their jobs. And I'm just fortunate enough to be able to work with them and everyone in our communities when an event like this happens. So thank you so much for the outpouring of support, not only to me, but the team members at my airport, for those of you that pay attention to my day job, which I know a lot of you do. So thank you so much for that. We have some cool stuff coming up. Like I said, I have some thoughts. I'll give at least a thought here. I'll leave this with you because feel free to send me some messages on this. But I went up in a biplane. I put a TikTok video up on it of my time. But I'm all in now. I met with first thing I had to realize, right? Waco is Waco. So it's not Waco, Texas. This isn't David Garush and, living in a compound. It's a Waco biplane. And I am going through the process right now to set myself up to probably purchase one in the spring or summer. So I would love to hear anybody's thoughts or opinions on that. I'll get further into that in another show. But I am working on stuff on my end. Feel free to jump on the TikTok and see that if you're interested. And I really, again, appreciate all of you. Thank you for tuning in. I love all the support that we get on the show. It means so much to me. So thank you for that. And until next time, my friends, I'll see you down the runway.